So last but not least, I will present you Irati Jiménez Pérez. She's a PhD candidate at the University of the Basque Country, funded by a predoctoral fellowship from this same university. She holds a degree in translation and interpreting and a master's in English literature and culture. Her research develops a literary analysis system for anthropomorphism, focusing on non-human animal representation in US literature. She has published and presented internationally and has completed a research stay at the University of Sheffield and is currently at Euskal University. And she has come to present Reimagining Non-Human Animal Literary Representation, a literary approach to anthropomorphisation. So whenever you want, Irati, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, before I start my presentation, I really want to thank my colleagues from the organizing committee, Animal Ikasketa Kritikoak, for all their work and also for the opportunity for me to learn a lot from them. I'm very, very grateful, and also the great volunteers that we had to organize the conference, and also obviously all of you that have attended. It's really real pressure. So thank you very much. And now I'm gonna start. My research explores how literature represents non-human animals as thinking, as also feeling, and sometimes narrating beings, and what these representations also reveal about ourselves, about humans. So I will be focusing on anthropomorphisation, which is the main focus of my PhD. Anthropomorphisation is the act of attributing human traits to animals. So it's been one of the literature, the oldest and most persistent narrative choices. For example, we have these moralizing creatures in fables, so we see in this beautiful picture. We have also these sentimental horses of the Victorian era. We have, for example, Black Beauty. And also nowadays in contemporary fiction, we have more hybrid creatures between human and non-human animals. So we could say that it has bridged the gap between species, but at the same time, it has also reaffirmed this binarity. So we could say that it sometimes functions as a mirror. So it reflects how humans imagine animals, which is very anthropocentric, but also it kind of reflects how we imagine ourselves. So although anthropomorphisation is normally quite dismissed as naive, as also sentimental, it is actually a very complex and ideologically charged tool and strategy when we write. We have two different perspectives on this matter. On the one hand, we have some scholars such as James Serpell, as you have in here, who basically see it as ethically productive, since basically by giving non-human animals that kind of representation, we are making it easier for the readership to empathize with them. So they see it as a really useful tool. However, others, such as Dustin Midman, believe the opposite, that basically it is a kind of what I call a cognitive domestication. So a way of making them legible only by shaping them the way we are. So these projects that I'm going to present here, it basically, it positions itself between these two perspectives. So trying to find a balance of like this kind of rigid tension between these two perspectives. And basically, I see anthropomorphisation as both a tool for empathy and also this side of distortion that I'm mentioning. Good. About the theoretical framework, I'm using basically like three main sources of theory. So we have on first critical animal studies. So from this, I take basically the idea that representing non-human animals is never neutral. So it always carries like some kind of ethical and also ideological implication. Then from narratology, I basically take tools to analyze how narrative voice, vocalization, and also the perspective of the narration constructs and contribute to constructing the idea of these non-human animal characters. And finally, from posthumanism, basically this helps to, like in this kind of way of decentering the human and focusing more on the non-human animals. So the main objective of this presentation and also my PhD is to develop a systematic framework for analyzing literary anthropomorphisation. So in literary studies, normally we often discuss anthropomorphisation as like with really broad terms like metaphor or empathy. But what I want to achieve here is to find or create a structured analysis tool that can tell us exactly what are the aspects that we have to focus on to determine if there is anthropomorphisation or not. Okay, so let's start. This is, by the way, disclaimer, this is a work in progress. I haven't finished my PhD, so I'm going to present the things that I've already managed to more or less complete. And obviously I only have 15 minutes. Now it would be less. So I'm going to just focus on some bits that I personally find more interesting to present here. But obviously the tool is going to be like quite more extensive. Okay, so as you can see here, this is like the overall look of the literary analysis tool. So we have micro, meso, and macro level. It goes from linguistic, from really like specific and small aspects of the narration, to the thematic, to the macro level, to the themes that we find, and how in each of these levels we can see, or where do we see this anthropomorphisation, or maybe not. Maybe we see like a very revolutionary way of representing animals. So in the case of the micro level, the first one, basically here we focus on how language itself humanizes, or maybe not humanizes, the animal through really specific linguistic markers. So, for example, you have the list here. I've divided this section between markers of agency and architecture of interiority. So how basically the non-human animal shows some kind of action and power to decide what the animal is doing in the narrative. And the architecture of interiority would be like more related to the thoughts, the conception of ethics, for instance. So here I have decided to present you in markers of agency, the first one, grammatical agency, because I think it's like quite easy to say. So, as I was saying, these syntactic structures play a very important role. This grammar plays a very important role in inscribing this idea of personhood, of agency at micro level. So we have, for example, markers such as first-person pronouns, complex subordinate sentences, clauses, and also positioning animals as grammatical subjects, like actually like doing something in the story. And also the use of intentional verbs. Yeah, I want to do something, for example. A good example that I've brought here is this one, Fox 8. So where here basically the animal character it is a first-person narration, and Fox 8, the main character, tells us this story, and his voice is constructed through a fractured syntax, and also spelling, because basically the fox has learned how to write in human language and is writing a letter to humans telling about his experiences. So basically, in order to the writer has decided to change or try to reflect this grammatical agency that, in this case, the fox has by imagining how a fox that learns how to read would write in English. So here we have, for example, dear reader, obviously everything is wrong, spelled. First, may I say sorry for any words I spell wrong because I'm a fox, so don't write or spell perfect, but here's how I learned to write. And the whole book, the whole letter is written like this, and it's an experiment of that, imagining how the fox will use English grammar in this case. Then, in the case of architecture of interiority, here, as I was saying, it's more related to this cognitive and emotional language, and basically describing these complex emotional responses. And in this case, I wanted to present to you the affective attribution. So here we have, for example, a call of the wild, the call for the wild, who uses basically a more restrained approach than normal. It often depicts these emotional states of the main character, the non-human animal, through action instead of actually saying, Buck, the name of the main character, feels this way. It kind of reflects that through bodily responses or environmental interactions, how the main character interacts with the wild. Then we are going to move on to meso-level. So here, meso-level analyzes more like aspects related to narratology, which in this case would be perspective and voice. Here I have 3 different subsections. So for now I have mediated voice, is all related about with the narrator, the type of narrator that we have. Then focalization, what is the focus? Who is the main focus of the story? Which characters? And narrative temporality, how time is perceived in the story, in the evolution of the story. So I have decided again to present to you this subsection, which would be about mediated voice, about narrators, and this difference between homodietic and heterodietic narrator. Just a quick reminder, normally the homodietic, that is the narrator that is present as a character as well, whereas heterodietic would be the one that is absent. Yeah, this is not part of the story. I'm going to be focusing on I'm going to be focusing on homodietic narrator. In here, I have noticed that in my corpus, we had 3 different types of narrators. So we have the traditional I, for example, Black Beauty, in this book, we have a horse that is telling us in first person the story of her life. And basically, it's all about telling us the horrible life and experience that he's had in a way to create some sort of empathy in the readership. So this would be the traditional I. It is normally highly anthropomorphist because basically it kind of reflects all the human emotions that we might have, but reflected on the animal. But it's an extreme case so that so that we can create this empathy on the readership. Then we have the fractured I, which will also be a first-person narration, but it's slightly different, just because it will add some kind of clue or for us to know that the narrator is a non-human animal. Because, for example, in Black Beauty, if we removed the idea of the narrator, the first-person narrator being a horse, it could be like we could imagine that is a person that has suffered a lot as well. But the fractured I would be implied in some way. For example, Fox A, with this micro level, it kind of experiments so that is already implied. Yeah, and then the shifting I would be not very clear, like characters that go through a process of animalization and kind of experiment that kind of, I don't know, evolution or change. Okay, here we have Night Bitch. So while you read, sometimes the human in this case, and the human narrator will like express some sort of animalization aspects and will become kind of animal, but it's kind of in between. Then we move on to the macro level. So here basically we explore, this is the general, so we are in the third level already. So we explore thematic and the ethical dimensions of it. So what type of topics we talk about when we narrate these stories. So in here, I have divided it into 3 different main categories. So we have ontologies for human-animal boundaries. So basically the idea of what is an animal, what is a human. Then the ethical and affective regimes, the consequences of what humans do to non-human animals in some way, or the other way around. And the existential and ecological. So more like, who are we in the world? That kind of question. Or what do we do with everything that's going on in the world? What is it? Maybe this is what actually links us to other beings in the world. So just to finish, I wanted to give you one of these examples in the ethical section. So really often we see how the suffering of non-human animals is represented in stories in a way to basically make the readership empathize and see the cruelties that we made them go through. This has been useful before. For example, we have Black Beauty. This was a boom at the time in the 19th century with this horse narrating the horrible life he's had. It's something that has worked, but for example, one of the things that I wonder, or that I've been wondering while I was writing this chapter, is if it is still useful, that kind of impact, or maybe there are like other types of narrations, like maybe more related to this therapeutic, like this reconnection with nature and animals, experimenting with that. That is a question. I leave you there just for you to think. Anyway, here we have an example of the suffering, Pete's letter. It's pretty brutal. So if you read it, it also has like some illustrations, and it's pretty shocking. And I'm gonna move on. And the conclusion then, it would be that these projects offers or attempts to offer a structured way to analyze how literature gives voice to non-human animals. And by distinguishing between these levels, we can trace, or we could trace how humans translate non-human animals into human language. My idea is to, at some point, after I have developed the analysis tool, I can use this in education to basically create discussions in different contexts to speak about animal rights. And also maybe experiment. One part of my PhD is experimenting with creative writing, so using all these data in order to see if I can overcome anthropomorphisation, which will be impossible, but at least like finding new ways of doing so. And that's all. Thank you.